We are picking up with the second page of your Modern China Timeline. So this is Modern China Timeline Part 2, and we're going to start with 2002 when this man, Hu Jintao, becomes the Communist Party leader. And as the presumably next premier and next leader of the military, etc., people have been really curious about what his philosophy was and where, is he going to bring new ideas to China. He has been quoted as saying that Mikhail Gorbachev was a traitor to socialism, so certainly he appears to be at least a committed communist. In 2003, Hu becomes president as expected. He appoints Wen Jiabao to be the head of the government. So while Hu is the president and he goes around and is the chief kind of foreign policy leader, and he's the one that the rest of the world deals with. The people most known to, or the person most known to people in China is the premier, Wen Jiabao. In 2004, Hu sort of seals the deal with taking leadership of the military. In 2006, he releases an 8-step program, and I just wanted to run through them with you real quick. You don't have to write these down. You need to jot that he does have the 8-step program in 06, but things like love the motherland, serve, don't disserve, uphold science, work hard, don't be lazy, be united, be honest, be disciplined and law-abiding, no plain living and hard struggle. Looking at this list, I want you to just imagine for a second if the president, excuse me, of the United States came out with a program for everyone to follow. Excuse me, I'm really under the weather this evening. Anyway, nothing here is particularly bad. These are all great things. It's just, in our opinion, none of the president's business if we are lazy or if we're hard workers. And I think there are some of you who know exactly what I'm talking about. I call this to your attention just to, again, highlight the very kind of different frame of reference and different perspective that the Chinese have. Here are some images that show past and present communist leaders, monuments to past and present leaders. 2006, again, Hu meets with members of the Kuomintang Party to discuss the situation with Taiwan. Taiwan I sort of have highlighted here on this map. It is the island. It's where the Kuomintang Party fled in following 1949 when China became the People's Republic. And China would like to see Taiwan reunited with China, the rest of China. And so we'll see. The United States will support whatever decision Taiwan wants to make. Taiwan at this moment is not ready to give up its autonomy or its wealth. But perhaps a situation similar to Hong Kong, where it's one country, two systems, could be worked out in the future. Lastly, it's also this year that Hu makes his first visit as president to the United States and meets with our leaders. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Google was really frustrated because of the censorship. People, who were using Google in China would be getting these error messages, and it really kind of, bothered Google, I think, probably because it made it seem like Google wasn't always working, and that wasn't the case. It was actually being censored, and so they launched a separate version of Google China, in 2006, where they agreed to censor themselves and not allow searches for things like democracy or June 4th or Tiananmen Square. This has been really controversial, an American company, denying free speech. But more than that, Google has battled with the Chinese over things like the government hacking into people's Gmail accounts. So it's been a tumultuous relationship, to say the least. And then, 2008, there is this devastating earthquake that you might remember. 70,000 were dead, 18,000 were never recovered, and one of the largest numbers of victims were students and teachers in classrooms. Parents were upset because the government had not been enforcing building codes, and there was a lack of renovations, and these buildings really weren't safe. And then we had this really dangerous situation where there were these quake lakes that were that came about as a result of the earthquake, and they were in danger of flooding, and millions of people were at risk. And so the people throughout China put to use social media, in particular Twitter and Facebook, and they organized themselves, and they created rescue groups and spread around information, which areas are most in danger. And at first the government sort of put the kibosh on this and said, no, only the government will be in charge of rescuing and giving out information. But this was such an overwhelming situation, and so many were missing and so many were in danger, that the government relented and allowed these individual groups, many of which were led by college students, to come in and form programs and help out on their own. So it was a real change in policy for China to allow independent groups like this to operate, and we'll see if it leads to more of the same in the future. Speaking of the future, issues that China's dealing with today, they are still dealing with the effects of the one child per family mandate that was instituted in 1979. As you know, China has over 1 billion people, and they worry that there will be just quite simply too many people to take care of in such a large country. So the policy has helped to a certain extent, but it also was very devastating to people who, at the hands of the government, were forced to have abortions or forced into sterilization operations. And so the government ended up revising its plan back in 2001 to allow for more exceptions and to not be so harsh. It did limit the population, but it also has skewed the number of boys to the number of girls. There is a gender gap. There are 117 boys in China for every 100 girls, which again, maybe doesn't sound that much when I talk about it like that, but there are 1 billion people, remember. So the boys really outnumber the girls, and this is going to have a social impact in terms of who these guys are going to marry. China has really become the world's factory, and it's almost to the point where we envision them moving on from this goal very soon, I guess I should say. It's been labeled the new industrial revolution. In fact, 10% of China's exports are sold to Walmart, which anybody shopping recently in Walmart won't be surprised at the vast number of made-in-China goods. But with all this growth and with this industrialization, it's really come at the expense of the environment. And 7 of the 10 most polluted cities in the world are located in China. From the U.S. perspective, we worry about this $162 billion trade deficit that we currently have with China. It's the largest for any single country ever in our history, and so trade deficits do concern us. China's GDP quadrupled since 1978. They have the second highest GDP after the United States. But being a communist country with a capitalist economy can often mean the worst of two systems. You get the best of two systems in theory, but communism is inherently weak with its bureaucracy, and it's prone to corruption. And of course, capitalism is prone to inflation. And there is a sort of, there are ups and there are downs. There are big gains, and then there are periods of stagnation as well. All right, lastly, just looking at a few pictures. This is the Walmart headquarters of China. And yes, in fact, American flags are notoriously made in Chinese factories, along with all kinds of other goods and services as well. I love this bottom picture that just has, thousands of cargo containers ready to be shipped all over the world. And then just to leave you with these images of China, leading the way in terms of modern infrastructure, modern architecture, some of the most beautiful and most modern places in the world are in China.